When it's time to fundraise, you can't be half fundraising. You're either doing it or you're not doing it. I built a deck that describes how we approach everything from how we think about promotions to how we think about remote work, which has been obviously a hot topic.
Today on the show, I'm happy to have Alex Frommeyer. He's the founder of Beam Benefits. They help with simpler, smarter employee benefits. So Alex, how much capital have you raised for this venture to date?
We have raised a little over $200 million over the years.
And how many employees do you currently have?
A little over 230.
And when did you actually found the business?
Beam was founded in 2012.
So today we're going to cover a little bit about your cultural playbook, but also how you're able to raise $200 million. So like that in itself is a job, a full-time job. So how do you go about raising that much money? How many years did it take to do that? Walk us through that journey.
Yeah, we started like many entrepreneurs not knowing anything about how to raise money. I remember getting my first $25,000 check from a local angel investor, high net worth individual type. And so to do a round years later at 80 million in proceeds is pretty wild. And to your point, it is a full-time job. One of the things that we did really effectively is when it's time to fundraise, you can't be half fundraising. You're either doing it or you're not doing it. And so I would actually move to San Francisco for 6 weeks and just take up an Airbnb. And I was there and I was raising money and I wasn't doing anything to support the day-to-day business. I would delegate everything out and actually be a full-time fundraiser. And then as soon as the round closed, you don't think about fundraising again until it's time to raise again. And that sort of binary approach, I think, is a lot more effective than raising money off the side of your desk over a very long period of time.
If you have to put your full focus into fundraising, how do you ensure the business is still operating?
Well, that is the trade-off, is that in some ways it probably won't, or it'll at least be different because different people might be making decisions in the spot that you would have been otherwise making them. But you have to have an amazing team around you. I'm lucky to have two amazing co-founders that have been with me since the beginning. And now these days, a robust executive staff. And together we're working all the time on strategy, on execution, on decision-making. And so people have a good sense of what good looks like. And even if things do go off the rails by 5 or 10%, as long as it's not catastrophic, you can come back with a bunch of new money and then you can put it to work growing and scaling the business.
When did you go about implementing a cultural playbook?
Too late is one answer. Beam was founded in 2012. We started really growing our headcount in 2015, 16, 17. And I probably didn't get around to building out our culture deck until maybe 2019, something like that. And so we were already at least 100 employees, probably 150 by the time I did it. And what I had been noticing at the time, which anybody that's gotten to any amount of scale will recognize, is all of a sudden there are people in the office that I don't know. And there are behaviors happening that I don't like. And one unfortunate realization of being a CEO is that everything that happens in your business is your problem. And it's also your fault, whether you realize it or not. In some ways, all of those weird behaviors that you don't like are buried somewhere down inside of you as well as a person. And when you show antithetical behaviors to what you think of as your best self, those are being modeled and replicated by other people who also have those tendencies. And the only way around it, and there's no perfect culture, of course, but the only way around it is to articulate the values that you care about and the behaviors that you want to reward, and then the behaviors that you want to punish as a business. And the best way to do that is to write them down. It helps hold you accountable to them as well. And so I put together, modeling after Netflix, who does this really effectively. I built a slide deck that's a living document. I've been editing it, adding to it, subtracting from it for years, for 5 years since. I built a deck that describes how we approach everything from how we think about promotions to how we think about remote work, which has been obviously a hot topic over the past couple of years, how we think about hiring and firing, how we think about what to wear in the office and everything in between. And it reinforces behaviors, values, and the things that you want to see more of, which you should spell out very clearly in the deck. And then the things that you want to eliminate and never see or hear again.
How do you ensure that the deck is actually implemented and operated by?
A fantastic question. One way to do it is to give it to everyone when they join and to really emphasize it even while they're going through the interview process. So we have an explicit step in our interview process, which is a selection of our team, a random group that helps us suss out culture and the fit of what values are represented by a potential employee in the business to what we think works and works best inside our particular business. And so that helps us maybe avoid making at least some mistakes. But what it really does is for the candidate, it helps reinforce that the company that you're about to join is really aware of its culture and it really cares about its culture so much so that it'll take extra time in the interview process specifically to talk about culture, to ask questions and to poke and prod at that piece of the puzzle. And then as soon as someone onboards, one of their first meetings in onboarding, first day of work with us is with me. And I'll take 15 minutes for all of our newly hired employees every single week and show them the culture deck, make them aware of it, why we built it, how we use it in the business. And then I email them a link right afterward. So everybody had the copy in hand. From there, every time we do a monthly all hands or like town hall, I usually pull a slide or two out of the deck and then pitch them back to the business. So usually they're relevant. Something's happened in that past month that was like a really bright spot or a negative spot in the business. So I'll pull out the relevant culture deck slides and then present them to the business as reinforcement or a reminder that our company and what we care about is particular and specific and something that we're willing to reinforce with our behaviors all the time.
How integral do you feel this deck has been to the growth of the business?
It's hard to say. What I do know is that I'm enormously proud of it. I think of it as my product for the business. You could say that the whole business as the CEO is my product, but I feel like our company has products and we build them and sell them. And my product for the business is the culture deck. And there's, I think, nothing more important than a CEO should be doing with their time than better understanding your culture, which is like, what is it today? Because you have a culture, whether you've defined it or not. Then once you know what your culture is, decide if you like it or not. I think every CEO probably has a ton of feelings about what their culture is today and what they aspire for it. And then do the hard work of defining it, writing it down, pointing at the things that we don't do well as a business and things that we don't. And even as recently as an hour ago, I was on a one-on-one with one of my direct reports, one of the VPs in our business. And I was asking his advice because he's been a really great articulator of transparency and what our company's version of transparency is. We always say that we're a very transparent business, but that's of course very subjective. We are obviously not telling everyone everything all the time, but we're also very, I think, forthright about here's what's going well in the company and here's what's not. And then every once in a while, you hear a piece of feedback that people wished they had more information. And I heard one of those things in a Slack channel earlier today. And I was like, huh, I wonder if that's did we get that right or not? And so I was asking advice from one of the folks on our executive team earlier today, because you're always tweaking and thinking, should we be talking about transparency a little bit differently than we do today? Because it looks like, in Slack at least, some people have a different idea than what I think is correct.
And if anybody wanted to learn more about Beam Benefits and see all the different products you guys offer and everything you do, how could they do that?
Best way to do it is beambenefits.com. That just gets you a little bit of a understanding of how we're modernizing employee benefits. Dental insurance is our main product, and we support small businesses all over the country. We're also pretty active on LinkedIn because a lot of the brokers that we work with are heavy LinkedIn users. So you can find Beam Benefits on LinkedIn as well.
Alex, thanks for sharing everything on how you've integrated culture. I know a lot of businesses struggle with that. And if, as you said, if you don't write it down, if you don't put something in place, it just takes a mind of its own.
That's right. Thanks for the time.
Definitely. And so maybe the next product will be a culture implementation from Beam Benefits. We don't know. We'll see.
I love it.
Thank you, Alex, for coming on the show and everybody for listening to another episode of Failing to Success. If you like the show, make sure to subscribe. I'm your host, Chad Kalecki, and we'll see you next time.